Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I have got one of our Watercolor Wednesdays for you, only I am posting it on a Friday. This is a birthday card and I wanted to have it go live on the actual birthday. So the stamp that I am using here is Stamping Bella, my favorite, and this character is called Oddball Geek. So I wanted to make a little bit of an alteration here. He had a pocket with a bunch of pens and pencils in it, and I didn't want that for my stamp. So I've grabbed some of my Post-it tape, trimmed that down into just a piece to cover up that little pocket and pens, and I've added that there. I'm gonna go ahead and ink up my stamp, and I'm gonna ink this really well. I wanna make sure all my lines are covered so that I can get this stamped out in one pass. So there I'm going to take my pokey tool and just remove that Post-it tape. That's really important. Don't forget to do that, otherwise you will have a big blob of ink on your watercolor paper. So I'll flip that over here, just pressing down firmly to try and get my lines as solid as I can. And here you will see that I will flip this over one more time. My lines on my computer weren't quite perfect, so thankfully I did have enough that when I pressed it over again, I was able to get the solid image. So I wanted to add a tie on my character here, and I just went ahead and pulled up a tie on my phone and looked at that as I was drawing it in. I would say the more difficult part of this was actually trying to get the collar added to the lapel sort of there, added to what was supposed to actually be a sweater. I know this is difficult to see. I will hold it up for you in a second there, but I'm just using a regular pencil to go ahead and pencil that in. And then once I was happy with that, I will start with my watercolor here. So I did stamp this out on my favorite Fabriano 140 pound hot press watercolor paper, and I will be using my go-to Gansai Tambi watercolor palette and my Santa Fe brushes. If I didn't mention before, I used my Simon Says Stamp black ink pad. That is my favorite ink to use as well when I'm watercoloring. So I have left the full process in here for you. I've cut out most of the sections where I dry in between, but I have sped this up quite a bit. So for those of you who enjoy watching the process, I'm going to turn up the music at this point. And for those of you who want to skip to the finished card or the putting together of the card, you'll want to go to around the 8-minute mark. So now that I have my coloring done and my panel is completely dry, I'm going to trim this out using my MFT Blueprints 32 frame die. And I decided I wanted to split my sentiment between the front and inside of the card. So I have just done a little stamp surgery here. This was an awfully tight sentiment to cut apart. So when I have something like that, what I do is actually try to bend the two lines apart from one another and then snip as close as I can between those. That way I'm not hitting any of the curves or the edges of the lines. So I'm going to go ahead and add some powder tool down here. I'm going to heat emboss this, and I'm working on some MFT black licorice cardstock. I've stamped that with some Versamark ink, and I'm just going to hit that twice. These are awfully thin letters, so I want to make sure that every bit of that is covered. And then I will go ahead and heat set this using some Simon Says Stamp fine detail white embossing powder. I've gone ahead and cut these sentiments apart, and for this front sentiment I'm going to trim that down so it's not covering any of my watercolor. Just eyeballing that there. I'll add some 1/2 inch Scor-Tape behind there. Peel away the backing and place that down on my panel. Just using my grid there to make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'll trim off the excess. For the inside, I'm going to keep my sentiment strip the entire length across the panel. This panel is trimmed to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, so it'll match the one I have on the front. And that is my usual Nina 80-pound Solar White. And again, I'll use that grid to get my sentiment lined up and trim off the excess. That front panel here, I'm going to pop up using some Scotch foam tape. I'll peel away the backing and place this down on top of my card base. And this card base is also made from MFT's black licorice. I'll add some ATG to the back of this panel and place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete the card for today. Here are a few close-ups of the finished card. In the description box below, you'll find my blog post, which has additional photos and links to the supplies I used. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.